Please let me blow up their podcast. I've been very good this month because your geek history lesson on Star Trek Lower Decks is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I am Jason Photon Torpedoes Inman. Welcome to Geek History Lesson. Welcome to your Mind University, because we are the podcast where we take one character, one show, one construct, and talk about them in a little bit less than an hour. And today, we are talking about Star Trek Lower Decks. That's right.
Dun, 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 dun. That's as far as I'll go.
Oh, you're doing the theme song.
Yeah, I could do the whole theme song.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great theme song.
It is a really good theme song. We're here to talk about Star Trek Lower Decks because Star Trek Lower Decks is about to hit Paramount Plus with its third season, and Ashley and I are big fans of the show.
Yes.
And we thought we would give an overview. We're going to have a discussion about the episode, talk to you about some things about the show. But basically, if you have not watched Star Trek Lower Decks and you're into really rad sci-fi, this is going to be the show that I hope by the end of it, you have launched your photon torpedoes to watch it.
Straight at Lower Decks. Straight at Paramount Plus.
Yeah, hopefully you've blown up Star Trek Lower Decks
with all your love.
But again, we'll minor spoilers in this episode. I don't think you really can have major spoilers for Star Trek Lower Decks, but I just want to throw that out there.
Fair.
Well, it's kind of,
and I think that's inherent in what the show is.
It's like Rick and Morty. It's like Solar Opposites.
Yeah.
It's almost like it is sort of a grandchild of both of those shows.
Very much, yeah.
And there isn't really a continuity. Like there isn't.
There isn't. Yeah.
There is and there isn't.
Yeah.
There's not much you can really spoil on this show, but we love this show a lot. It's coming back, and so Ashley and I wanted to have a big discussion for this. Ashley, was this episode suggested by any of our listeners?
It was. We have genius listeners who do things like anything from Star Trek. So today's teaching assistant is Zach is Batman. Thank you for requesting Star Trek content.
Zach, now we know you're Batman. Didn't think about that one, did you?
I'm assuming that he's an employee of Batman Inc. and maybe he's Batman of a very specific region.
Okay, fair. There,
Yeah.
we don't know which country he's the Batman.
Yeah.
All right, I will accept your retcon, Ashley.
Thank you.
Let's move into the 10-cent origin.
Yes, what is that?
The 10-cent origin. Why are you throwing this back at me?
Because I'm going to do the 10-cent origin, so you do the intro. We've
right.
done 400 of these.
Listeners, if you could only hear the setup that we have to do for every podcast episode. Ashley throws 400 episodes right in my face. Do you know the amount of times I've had to tell her how to adjust her microphone?
Just was adjusting my microphone as we were starting this episode.
Literally. What episode number is this?
425?
425 plus times I've adjusted her microphone.
Counting nothing for the extras.
The 10-cent origin. So there's your shade back at you. Hold on. I'm going to beam some shade. Oh, by the way, also, since this is a Star Trek episode, you're going to get lots of lovely sound effects. So here is some shade beamed right at you.
I can tell you're not the transporter chief.
There we go. There's kind of a delay on these sound effects. I apologize. The 10-cent origin is where Ashley's going to give you a Cliff Notes version of what we're talking about. So in case you go to an amazing cocktail party at 10 Forward, you can tell all the Bolians around you about Star Trek Lower Decks.
Jason and I did go to 10 Forward. Star Trek Lower Decks is an animated adult comedy Star Trek television show. It is the franchise's first animated series since the 1970s series Star Trek the Animated Series, and its first comedic series. It is set in the year 2380. Too long didn't read, after Voyager but before Picard. It was created by Mike McMahon. Full disclosure, Jason and I both know Mike McMahon. Stars the crew of the USS Cerritos, primarily the Lower Decks, lower-ranked crew members. And this is the crew in charge of Second Contact.
What is that?
So First Contact is when two alien races meet for the first time. Second Contact is like everything that happens after.
It's all the paperwork.
It's kind of the rude joke that people make about Buzz Aldrin being like, that's cute. You were the second man on the moon. It is inspired by...
Of like the 13 people that have been on the moon.
Yeah. Like it's still an incredibly exclusive club. It is inspired by the ideas in Star Trek Lower Decks, which is season 7, episode 15 from The Next Generation in a storyline called Lower Decks. If you haven't seen our series... It's also like the Red Shirt Diaries, our 31-episode Star Trek parody web series about the lowest-ranking episodes of the USS Enterprise.
Which is still online. I just want to say at youtube.com/Jawiin. There's no promotion here, but like we made this web series in 2015 and 2016. 30 episodes.
We made it in 2014.
2014, 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
The last episode aired in 2016.
2016, yes.
And it is about Ensign Williams, the lowest ranked member on the USS Enterprise. And I still get comments to this day where people are like, this is exactly like Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yep.
But we love Star Trek Lower Decks, so it's all
We
good.
do.
But if you want more Star Trek Lower Decks content, go check that out.
Also, figure out like the 20 characters that Jason plays in that. And the series stars Tawny Newsome, Jack Quaid, Noelle Wells, Eugene Cordero, Don Lewis, Jerry O'Connell, Fred Tatasciore, and Gillian Vigman.
Is Gillian Vigman Captain Freeman?
She is Dr. Tiana.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right, let's move it into Meet Cute.
Yeah, the Meet Cute. What's that, Jason?
You can tell me.
Okay. That is the name that I picked, if this is what we're doing, from romantic comedy writing about where we first met this character or this show and how cute it was.
Dead, Jim.
Well, with the show, Jason and I both watched it getting a screener for the pilot, and that's not a super fun story. So I thought for the Meet Cute this week that we could talk about maybe what our expectations were of Lower Decks going into it. So Jason, I'd love it if you would tell us first instead of trying to pull up sound effects.
What in the name of heaven is this?
That was my first thought to Star Trek Lower Decks. I was, a lot of people were against the show, I know, before it came out, but I actually was excited because I do think that Star Trek is a franchise similar to Star Wars, where people assume that if it's not like the very first thing that ever came out called Star Trek or Star Wars, then it cannot be Star Trek or Star Wars. And I am not of that opinion. I am the person that I think most franchises, most stories are elastic and they can be pushed further than we realize. I was a little apprehensive, but I enjoyed the pilot. And I do think the show has gotten better and better and better and better as it has gone along. So, but I kind of assumed, since Mike, the showrunner, had worked on Rick and Morty and worked on Solar Opposites at the time, I assumed he was going to be able to pull it off. Also, like, the one thing that gave me the biggest trust about this show was, a lot of people don't know this, Mike McMahon ran a Twitter account for several years that was called Star Trek The Next Generation Season 8.
Which he then turned into a book.
Which was always very funny, is the idea that there were like these just descriptions of like what the Season 8 of TNG would have been. Now, they were pretty goofy and off the ball, but it's a fun little book.
Yeah, we own it. We have a signed copy.
We do. How about you, Ashley? What were your expectations for Star Trek Lower Decks going in?
So I had not seen Rick and Morty before this, but I will tell you that the Rick and Morty fan base really grinds my gears sometimes. And I am not admittedly a super fan of the post Adventure Time aesthetic that we're in animation right now. I'm a hard sell on a lot of it, but then knowing Mike as we do and knowing that he was passionate about Star Trek, I was like, it's probably going to be good. And then Roddenberry asked me to cover it on Mission Log, and I was like, well, I guess I can't wait. I have to watch this as it comes out. And when we watched the pilot, I remember being like, oh, thank God, this is really good. I like it. And then the stuff that, like, I was not super warm on Boimler when it first started. A lot of the things that I wasn't hot on in the pilot have either developed or I've come around on. Like, I think Boimler's actually a really good character, and I think they do play on the parts of his personality that are perhaps more grating. So I was on the fence, but it's very quickly became my favorite of the new Trek shows. So, and it remains that for me. I recommend Lower Decks to everyone, even people who think they don't like Star Trek, because we're going to get into this. It is rife with references and Easter eggs, but I also think because it's animation, and I think because more than the other ones, it's created in a bit of a bubble, I think they get away with a lot more. It's a lot more self-contained.
I agree.
So truly could not be more thrilled that it turned out to be awesome.
Yes. All right. So let's move into the History 101 of Star Trek Lower Decks, and that means we got to open up the hailing frequencies. So we're going to dive deep into Star Trek Lower Decks, have a great conversation. But if you need more on Star Trek Lower Decks, this week's Geek History Lesson Extra episode on Patreon is what Star Trek cameos need to happen on Star Trek Lower Decks. So that's where we're going to get deeper into some of the Easter eggs. It's a lot like this, except we curse. So you can head on over to patreon.com/Jawiin. That's Jawiin, and join to get more episodes like Jason and Jeremy John about Justice League, where we review every episode of the Justice League animated series. There's 3 bonus podcasts a month over there, comic book scripts, bonus art, our Patreon exclusive Discord, and more. So go check it out at patreon.com/Jawiin. And thanks to all the super friends that support us over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should say that there are going to be full spoilers for the first 2 seasons of Lower Decks. So I'm going to say that right now. Full spoilers. But as we said,
there's not a huge continuity.
There's not really a lot you can spoil. It's moments that you would spoil. It's not story.
Also, in full transparency, Jason and I have seen some of the screeners for season 3, but we will not be talking about them here today.
So Ashley, let's explain a little bit more about the show. Like, Star Trek, of course, is a universe that is set in the 24th century. It is in our future. Earth is a utopia. And there's this organization called the United Federation of Planets, which Earth is a part of. And their sort of armada, their peacekeeping armada, is manned by all these starships, and the USS Cerritos, which is the hero ship of Star Trek Lower Decks, is a member of that fleet. Yes,
a California class ship. And this is what's interesting about the Cerritos and the very ethos of Lower Decks is they kind of do the grunt work. They kind of do not all the sexy exploring.
The bureaucracy
stuff. Yeah, a lot more of the day-to-day.
Which would exist in that universe.
It would exist. Of course it would. It would exist in any type of like organization or power structure like this. But because we're so used to seeing the bestest of the bestest, I really enjoy the exploration of like, what does everybody else do and examining how that's heroic in its own way. But of course, it is presented from a very comedic point of view. So you often see people who are not at their best, but are pushed to that point.
So let's talk about this. I mean, we've already said that we're big fans of this show already, but like, is there room for a comedy-only show in the Star Trek universe?
I mean, I would have said no. For a long time, because a lot of my favorite episodes of Star Trek, particularly Deep Space Nine, are some of the more serious ones. And all of the Star Treks
have comedy episodes.
And all of them have bad comedy episodes.
I will say this, Star Trek tends to do comedy bad.
But here's the difference. Lower Decks, comedy writers, versus a lot of the other Star Trek shows are more drama writers. So it's almost like when you put somebody to work in their specialized field, they might be a little bit better at it. But I think of like some of the holodeck episodes across various series and how much of a whiff they can be from time to time. So I would have told you.
There's a lot of bad Ferengi episodes.
A lot, yep. Yeah, I would have told you.
But one of the best, one of the best Star Trek episodes is The Trouble with Tribbles. Very early in the run. Very
silly, yeah. It's not a comedy, but silly.
It's a silly episode, but it is one of the best episodes Star Trek ever made.
It's certainly one of the most iconic episodes of Star Trek ever made. But then you also get like Quark in a dress, and you're like, this is not it's not as funny as it was probably pitched in the room.
Exactly.
I would not have thought that there would be room for like a strict comedy in the Star Trek universe. If I was in the room when this was being pitched, I would have been like, really? We want to do the yuck show? But like, you do. I think that's also why I'm so delighted that it's so good. What do you think?
I think you answered. I think it's perfect. I think there is comedy. There's plenty of room for the comedy in Star Trek universe because, again, troubles and tribbles and stuff like that. Before we get into like talking about what makes Lower Decks so unique, I would love to if we just went through sort of the cast list.
Yeah, we can do that. No problem.
And tell everybody like who are our main Lower Deckers characters.
Yeah. So the 2 co-leads of the show are Bradward Boimler, who's played by Jack Quaid. He is your classic he's a mediocre white guy. And I say that, I know someone in the reviews is going to drag me for that, but like that is who that character is intended to be.
I love listening to these podcasts, but Ashley gets so woke sometimes.
Yeah. And when I watched the pilot, I was like, wow, cool, a mediocre white guy. And let me tell you, Boimler does really step up and gets a lot of character growth. Beckett Mariner, voiced by Tawny Newsome, she is the other co-lead of the show. She's your too cool for school hotshot. But but who's very lazy. And she is revealed to be the daughter of Captain Freeman, who is the captain of the Cerritos. Why?
And in a lot of ways, you have to say, like, I just want to point out that
by Don Lewis.
Boimler is the mediocre white guy. Mariner is the Mary Sue. In a lot of ways.
Yes, and again, intentionally.
It's an intentional choice.
Yep. And it's an intentional, riff on these sort of archetypes. Then we have Tendi, who is our Orion, voiced by Noelle Wells. She's my favorite. She is my Lower Decks girlfriend. I love her so much.
She's a cutie patootie.
She's the best character on the show.
She's the best character.
She is the over-enthusiastic character who gets in her own way because she's over-enthusiastic. Then we have Rutherford, voiced by Eugene Cordero, who is the cyborg. I guess he's a cyborg, technically. He's got a lot of implants. He is a tryhard as well, like Tendi, but he's also fairly oblivious. Like, he's not aware of his own capabilities. He stands in for, like, your Data characters, you know? Then in the, like, upper echelon of characters, we also have Shax, who is, I believe, the chief of security, voiced by Fred Tatasciore. He is the meanest Bajoran you'll ever see. I love him so much. We have Dr. Tiana, who's voiced by Gillian Figman. She is the Cadian or Cation doctor who's very brusque.
She is a callback to Star Trek the Animated Series because they had a character, and it was a big complaint that back in the day when Star Trek the original series was airing in the 60s, people were like, why are all the characters so human? Because they couldn't afford to put people in prosthetics.
Well, so also the technology just wasn't there.
So on the animated series, basically, if it wasn't the main seven, they made them weird aliens.
Yeah.
So Akkadian first appeared on Star Trek the Animated Series.
And then rounding out the main cast is the number one, and that is Jack Ransom, voiced by Jerry O'Connell. In his who's what if Riker was a jerk, basically, and like really into himself?
And Jerry O'Connell, very famous actor, but also we should talk about married to number one, Rebecca Romaine on Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Yeah. So it's in the family.
So we have two XOs that are married to each other.
Also former voice of Superman.
He is a former voice of Superman. So one thing that makes Lower Decks so unique is that it really shows us an imperfect version of Starfleet. Now, Ashley, in other versions of Star Trek, how would you describe Starfleet to someone? Like, if somebody's like, what is Starfleet? What would you say? I
usually use the peacekeeping armada description because I think that's fairly accurate, because it's very military. There are ranks.
They are naval ranks too.
They are naval ranks. We have like an escalation of force that we follow. There is often war or potential wartime storylines that are explored, but in all other shows, like, all of the characters that you see presented as main cast members are the best of the best, or they become the best of the best. Like, in the notes here, I was like, how many best engineers in Starfleet have we ever? Like, every engineer on every ship is the best engineer on every single ship.
The miracle worker, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that's a trope of Starfleet. And tropes aren't always bad things, right? Tropes emerge for a reason. And I think it's because, like, we still, as a society that doesn't have interstellar travel, I think there's still, like, a very healthy fear of space. So you want to believe that the people who are going out there are all working at an 11 at all times, and that's what keeps them safe and lets them overcome adversity. And I really admire that Lower Decks is like, what if the opposite, though? Because even in military forces that we have on this planet, or in any fields, like, a doctor's a doctor whether they get 100 or a 65.
Yep.
And it's much more interested in the characters who have the 65, but there's also a value in not being the best.
Well, there's something that's interesting about this show, is that the idea that these people, every person, every ship in Starfleet, in the Star Trek universe, could not be the best ship of all time. We always hear that speech. There's always that episode. Janeway gave it, Sisko gave it, Archer gave it, Picard gave it, where they would say, this is the finest crew in the fleet.
Yeah.
And every crew cannot be the finest crew in the fleet. And also, to be honest with you, to make an organization like the Federation, over 160 membership planets across, they say how many light years it's across, you would need a lot of bureaucrats.
Yes, you would.
You would need a lot of people just to sign the paperwork. And that is the interesting idea about the Cerritos, and it's also, I think, was an intentional choice by Mike McMahon when he created the show, was the idea that these lower deckers are lower deckers. So they are the lowest ranked members of this crew amongst the lowest ranked ship.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
so not only like they're probably like, if there is supposed to be like 10,000 starships in the Federation, and it kind of seems like there are 10,000 starships in the Federation.
Yeah.
That the Cerritos would be in the bottom 10.
Yeah, they are the ones doing the busy work.
Yes.
Which it's funny because characters like Boimler loves that stuff because he's just so into everything that Starfleet is about that there's an episode where the like fake drama starts out where they have to move a bunch of boxes around and he's like, yeah, I can't wait. And it's equal parts funny to watch a character be enthused to do that and then watch a character be like, this is not as like, I joined Starfleet to explore the galaxy and like, here we are moving some boxes around.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
That's okay.
So Ashley, let's talk about a little bit of, let's talk about like, why do we like the Cerritos if they are such, I don't want to say the full word.
Yeah.
F-ups.
Yeah.
As one would say. Why do we like them? Why? I mean, because here's the thing. Yes, we did talk about this, like best of the best. And like part of the idea of Star Trek is that utopia, it's humanity being better.
Yeah.
But yet we are watching the crew of screw-ups.
Mm-hmm.
So why, in a franchise that is based around humanity evolving, do we like watching the screw-ups? Or why are we advocating that everybody should watch the screw-ups?
I think it's a multi-layered answer. One, this is why certain types of reality shows are popular. It's fun to watch people be bad at things.
Mm-hmm.
This is why fail videos are popular.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun to watch people that's the Schadenfreude of it, right? It's fun to watch people like not be at their best. But from a storytelling perspective, I think we like it because we're way more like these characters. We are way more like Boimler and Tendi and Rutherford and Mariner than we are like Geordi and Data and Beverly and Riker. And I think they're a lot more relatable in their frustrations because it's easier to understand why Mariner would be frustrated that her best friend is assigned to a ship where she's not going to see him anymore. Than it is to understand like Riker's battle about whether or not to go to lead the flagship Titan. You know what I mean? Or leave the flagship for the Titan. I think they're just much more relatable, and I think it's way easier to see yourself in these characters. And when you do things like we've had a billion podcasts and Geek History and Extras where we've explored like which character in this franchise am I most like, or like which if for House of the Dragon we just did like which house are we most in. Like these characters are so much more relatable than a lot of the mainstream characters of Star Trek because we see ourselves in them. But I also think from like to pull out to the macro for a second, this is the 7th, 8th Star Trek show that's ever been made?
Let's count it through. It's Star Trek the original series. It's Star Trek the animated series. It's Star Trek the Next Generation. Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Star Trek Voyager.
Enterprise.
Star Trek Enterprise.
Discovery.
Star Trek Discovery.
And Picard.
Star Trek Picard.
So this is 9.
And then Lower Decks is 9.
So by this
not counting the short ones.
Yes, not counting the short treks or the films. So by this point, by being this many decades into Star Trek, this show flips the script in so many interesting, compelling ways that I don't think this show would have worked in the 90s the way it worked. Even if it was comedic, even if it was the same talent and we just bopped them back in time, it would not have worked the way it works now because we are in this meta narrative, Easter eggy dissection nostalgia bomb. And I think that's what is compelling about it. And I think the comedy edges it into a different sphere than something like Star Trek Discovery is also a different presentation of characters and tropes than we're used to. But I think with a comedy, we're just willing to go with it in a different way.
Well, I also say too that I think Star Trek Lower Decks does something interesting, funny because it explores this idea of the classic Star Trek episode is Kirk and Spock show up to a planet, make first contact with a brand new planet. We find out that the planet is doing something wrong that even we, the people in modern day, know is wrong because of some moral issue. Every Star Trek episode is a moral issue. And then somehow Kirk and Spock teach them how to not do that thing. And then they say, good luck. And then hopefully we'll see you out there someday and warp off.
Yeah.
So if you actually think about that in reality, that planet could blow themselves to kingdom come 17 times over before the Enterprise ever comes back. And that also leads to, I think, some very funny situations. And it does make sense that there would be a ship like the Cerritos that's like, okay, Kirk, wrong time period, I know.
But just go with it for the metaphor.
Picard warps off from a planet, and then he immediately hails the Cerritos and is like, yes, I need you to go to Nebulon 5 and give them bottles of water.
Yeah.
And then they're like, bottles of water? That's what we're doing this week?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I think also where the humor comes in.
I'd also love it if, I'd also love it if we could get into the question of found family and family, because like family is such a deep held important part of Star Trek. Like Deep Space Nine and Voyager are like two prime examples of crew as found family. The Cerritos is an incredibly dysfunctional found family, or actual family in the case of Freeman and Mariner. And what about that like speaks to the show and makes it popular in this way?
I don't really think it contributes anything.
That's so interesting to me.
Not at all. I really, to be honest with you, I'm going to say like, so it is interesting. Like, all right, okay, this is not the first Star Trek show to have a family relationship, and we can get into that later on.
Yeah.
But we can put out on Front Street because we can talk about stuff we like and still criticize it. That's a very interesting thing about it. This aspect of the show is one of my least favorite aspects of the show. I think the relationship between Captain Freeman and Mariner is one of my least favorite things about the show. Now, I assume you disagree, so I'd love to hear your point and perspective on this.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm curious as to why.
I just don't think it adds anything to the show. I think when you think about, it's also like it's the other criticism I've heard about Star Trek Lower Decks is the idea of like, if this is truly a Lower Deck show, why do we see the senior staff? Now, I disagree with that because I think it would be impossible to do the show without seeing them interact with the senior staff. But we do see the senior staff quite a bit. And if we go back to the origin of this whole series, the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Lower Decks, the senior staff are secondary characters. And in fact, the storyline that the senior staff happens in the episode happens in the background of that's why that episode is one of my favorite episodes of TNG, and simply for the fact that like you can tell that a normal episode of Star Trek is happening, but it's happening in the background. And you only get to learn about what is going on when these lower ranked members learn what is going on. And even by the end of the episode, like half of the cast of that episode don't know what happened because the mission was so classified that it just happened in the background. So I don't know. It's a little weird to me that, her mom is here and that we have the mom of one of the lower deckers. Now, I'm also hoping and I'm trusting Mike McMahon because I think he's a brilliant writer that there is something down the road. And that, maybe this is the finale of Lower Decks and we're not going to get to it for a while, which is totally fine. And but as for me, I don't think it adds much to the show. And I think I would rather see Mariner off on her own because I love the interactions with her dad.
Yeah.
And I like the
Admiral Freeman.
I like the idea that this screw up lower decker has a high ranked admiral as a dad. And I like that we get to call him every once in a while. But I think the mom being on the ship, who is a captain, to me keeps reminding us, the audience, that Mariner is kind of a screw up. And I think in the inherent basis of the show, I think like everybody, I'm assuming that this show is going to show these lower deckers grow up.
And we have seen that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Boimler has definitely changed. So like, I don't know. It's to me, it's the constant reminder of like, well, this is what you could be, but you're not. Okay.
I have two follow-up questions.
Okay, please.
One, would you like it better? And this is just your taste.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's all my taste. I still love Lower Decks. I think it's a great show.
Would you have liked it better if the Freeman and Mariner relationship had been kept secret until maybe like the final season or the final episode?
Oh.
Like if nobody had known except us, the audience?
I would be okay.
Not to offer a rewrite, just
No.
talking.
That changes the tone of the first season if we don't learn that till the season 1 finale. That really gives the first season a different tone.
Yeah.
It also makes some very interesting character interactions when you think about like what would Boimler and Rutherford's and Tendy's reaction to that be, where they'd be like, "You're the daughter of the captain, and you didn't tell us." Especially since they have different last names. Nobody, nobody would assume that.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I think it would have changed my reaction to that. But we knew that right out the gate. Like we knew that in episode 1.
Yeah, but the characters didn't.
That's true.
Not all of the characters.
That's true.
did.
But I would say I would have rather as an audience member not have known.
So then to go back to the idea of like found family, what are some of the relationships that like you enjoy more? Like I really like Mariner and Boimler's friendship.
Yeah, I think that's the best relationship in the show.
As like siblings, but then I also love Tendi and Rutherford and I want them to kiss and I don't think they're going to and it makes me sad.
No, I don't think they're going to.
And then I love that Dr. Tiana is like very hot for Chax. I think that's very funny.
So one of my favorite relationships is Rutherford with the chief engineer of the ship. And I can't remember the chief engineer is voiced by Paul Scheer.
Oh, I will find his name.
The gentleman has a mustache.
Oh boy.
I
can't believe I can't remember his name.
That's the other big problem is that because usually on a Star Trek show, you have 7 people and it's only the senior staff. And so it's very easy to remember. Billups. But see, with Lower Decks, we have the Lower Decks people and the senior staff. So there's like almost too many people to remember.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time remembering like, who's the engineer? Who's the commander?
Billups also looks like a guy Jason and I know in real life. And that was all I could think of.
Oh, he does? Okay.
Yeah, he looks like George.
Okay. I guess. I don't really see that at all, but okay. But anyways, and that's a reference for nobody will get this at all.
Nobody.
Okay. Let's move on here, Ashley.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some other familiar relationships.
Yeah. Let's talk about Freeman and Mariner in contrast to Benjamin and Jake Sisko.
From Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
Yeah.
Oh, what a very interesting discussion. Okay, so let's talk about Ben Sisko, Captain Ben Sisko.
The greatest parent in all of Star Trek history?
Writer Jake Sisko. And, well, some people probably Kirk, but I mean, Kirk was not around when David was dead.
Kirk was an absentee father.
Kill my sons, those bastards. So you seem to like the Captain Freeman and the Mariner relationship. So let's talk about Ben Sisko and Jake Sisko versus Captain Freeman and Mariner.
No, I'm not like obsessed with the relationship. I think I'm warmer on it than you are. I'm like very interested in the last name thing because there's not a canon answer for that. There's only fan theories for why Mariner has
Is her dad Admiral Freeman too?
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay, so since I've opened this can of worms, the popular theories are she had to change her name to serve on the ship so that she wouldn't be shown favoritism by the captain.
I could see that.
Also, if this were a real paramilitary, she would not be on the same ship.
They would never have assigned her on that ship.
It's just like how
her parents would not be in her chain command.
Exactly.
Yep.
But that's fine. I don't care.
Yep.
It's fun for the sake of the show. Could be her mother's maiden name.
I like that theory.
She could have been born out of wedlock.
Oh, that's fair.
Or she just simply could have changed her name.
I think she changed her name. I think she changed her name to not be compared to her parents.
I think so too. Yeah.
And I would say my fan continuity canon, I say that Mariner is her mother's maiden name.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be answered, but I bet it won't be answered till the end of the show.
Yeah, it probably won't be answered till the final episode.
Yeah,
you're probably right.
So
because it doesn't matter in the end of the day.
I just think it's very interesting to talk about like these two set of parent and child relationships because people tend to think of women as being warmer and more familial, and Freeman and Mariner fight constantly. And it is all you can do to get them to say that they like each other. And people then tend to think of male familial relationships as being a little tougher. And Ben and Jake Sisko have such a good, healthy, loving relationship. Like I will die on the hill that like Benjamin Sisko is the best parent in Star Trek history. And
well, I don't think you don't really have a lot of other people to compare him to because
that's true.
In all honesty, they portray the idea of Starfleet as like, if you join Starfleet, you're going to kind of be alone.
Yeah.
Like you have decided to dedicate yourself to Starfleet. I mean, Kirk is a parent.
The O'Briens.
Chief O'Brien has 2 kids. Yes. There's Sisko.
Alexander. Worf is a bad dad.
Worf is a bad dad. Worf is a bad dad. Rom, who's not technically part of Starfleet.
Yeah. Well, he does become eventually. Rom's
a good dad.
Very good dad.
Rom's
Beverly
a good dad.
Crusher's a good mom.
Beverly Crusher's a good mom. Dr. Beverly Crusher on Star Trek TNG. Giorgio is sort of a parent, but not a good parent in Discovery.
I mean, here's a question. Is Sarek a good parent?
No. He has 3 bad kids.
He's got like a bunch of
He's got 3 bad kids.
You think Spock is a bad kid?
Yes. He doesn't talk. When we meet Sarek
Oh, that's
for the very first time in TOS Journey of Babel.
That is true. They're on the outs.
He hates him.
Yeah.
Sarek is a bad dad.
Sarek and Amanda, bad parents.
They are. They're really bad. They raised 3 catastrophes. One is a Vulcan who's like in Vulcan prison.
Oh my God.
One is a Vulcan who hates Vulcan so much he goes and joins humanity.
Yeah.
And then the third is like a girl a woman whose first decision is to mutiny her captain.
Yeah, that's fair. B'Elanna,
He's a bad dad.
B'Elanna and Tom, let's be honest, questionable parents.
Well, we don't even get to really
Tom,
we don't really get to see it because the kid is not born until the final episode.
That's true. Yeah.
And then, Phlox is a dad. Dr. Phlox is a dad on Enterprise.
I think Tuvok is also a dad.
Tuvok is a dad, too. But we don't really get to see them in that role.
Exactly.
So,
also,
and Captain Archer is all of our dads.
That's right. Also, Ben and Jake are like 2 of the lead characters. Of course, they get like a lot more focus time. I just think it's interesting. And I actually really appreciate it. And we can do this because we're in this like new Trek era where we're doing like meta-narrative things that we can actually see like a feminine familial relationship that is strained.
I want to talk about, actually, we talked about this earlier where I said, I'm gonna skip us ahead a little bit here.
It's fine. Do whatever you want.
I'm gonna open some fire here.
Okay. Oh my God.
There's some phasers for you.
You firing on me? Is that what's happening?
That's right. And,
oh boy.
And the audience. So I mentioned that one of my aspects that like I go back and forth in this show is the fact that we see a lot of the senior staff, the bridge crew. So are there characters from the senior staff bridge crew of Lower Decks that you think they should highlight more?
That's a very interesting question. Because I definitely don't want more of Ransom. I think that he is being used the perfect amount because he is a punchline character. And he gets a lot of like quirky.
By the way, I guess we should have mentioned that this is like more of us talking about what we like and don't like about the show. This is not really going to convince anybody to watch the show at this point.
Well, if you read the final question, that's what we're going to get to.
We're just kind of like talking about what we like about the show. I'm just throwing it up there.
I mean,
okay,
you're welcome to change any of the questions that you like.
Talk about Ransom, please.
Like I don't think we need any more Ransom.
Yeah.
I think Ransom is perfectly used. I don't think we need any more Captain Freeman. I actually think the less of Captain Freeman, the better. To be very, very frank. The one that I would like to see probably explored the most would be Shrax.
Why?
It's because he's a Bajoran, and like I'm really soft on Bajorans, and it's also because he, of all of the bridge crew characters, he's the one who's interacted with and facilitated character development with the other characters the most. Like if we were going to add one of them, like and be like they are always going to be in every single episode, he would be the one that I would want to see more of. Honestly, I would like to see a lot more of Jennifer the Andorian. I think she's fun.
I don't know who that is.
She's the female Andorian character who we saw in the second season, and her and Mariner go on a date. I think she's fun.
Okay.
Are there any senior staff or like bridge crew members that you would like to see some more of? I
would like to see, I think Shrax is the one, like the security guard, because I think he's also a lieutenant.
Yep.
So he's even like, to me, that's what I would love to see this show lean more into, because in most Star Trek shows, we spend the most time with the captains and the commanders. And I would like to spend time with the lieutenants and the ensigns. And Shrax, I believe, is only a lieutenant. So technically, he's only one step above a lower decker. So
that's true.
I think it would be fascinating to spend more time with him. I think he would hang out with those people. I mean, we've seen them.
We've seen them party pretty hardy with those hot bananas.
I think we've seen them play racquetball with Shrax.
Yeah.
At various times. So like, whereas like I could understand a senior crew member would be like, I'm not going to lower myself to like talk to you ensigns and stuff like that. I think lieutenants and lieutenant commanders would.
Yeah.
Because they were just those people a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's interesting.
They were just the ensign. Whereas like a captain or a commander, there's a strong chance you haven't been an ensign for 15 years. So it's a memory.
Yeah, there's also, it's interesting when you sort of compare them because like Shrax is just a lieutenant. American pronunciation. Although he is animated to...
It's also how, like, lieutenant is specifically a British rank.
Yeah, I think it's just to be like, this is a French word and we're not pronouncing it the French way.
Yes.
Lieutenant.
Yeah, because I was like, there has never been a lieutenant in an American military structure.
No, but that's what I learned. So that like lives rent free in my brain.
Yeah.
So
there might have been very early on.
Even though Shrax is, I mean, there definitely was during the Revolutionary War.
Sure, probably.
Even though Shrax is a lieutenant, he is animated to look like a more mature character than someone like Ransom. You know, like Ransom is in command track. So obviously, like Ransom seems like he's maybe 5 minutes older than Mariner, honestly.
So I want to also talk about that. It's interesting that Tendi, the Orion, and Rutherford, the engineer, have sort of become these like lovable characters.
They are beloved,
even though Mariner and Boimler are the leads.
Yeah.
But it seems like when you talk to people about this show that Tendi and Rutherford, the lower deckers of the lower deckers, are the more beloved. You talked earlier about their romance. So I want to ask, why do you think these two characters are the breakout characters? And then also, do you think they'll ever pay off the romance? We know, by the way, we should say that like at this point, Star Trek Lower Decks has been renewed to season 5.
Yeah, there's lots of possibilities.
At the time of this podcast, season 3 is premiering.
Is just about to premiere.
So we have 3 more seasons of Lower Decks.
They are beloved. I mean, I have a shirt from the first season that's Tendi with the dog.
Yeah, I bought you that shirt.
Yes, you did. I think they're beloved because they're wackier. The thing about Boimler and Mariner, like they are interesting characters. They both had great moments. They both had laugh out loud moments. They both had great moments of character development, even within like the limited continuity of the show. However, leading characters are rarely the most interesting characters because they have to fill the quote unquote, in the comedy terms, straight man roles. And Beckett and Bradward are definitely that. And Tendi and Rutherford are a little more out there. They are out there visually. It is a female character with green skin and an undercut, and it is a human robo.
I forgot about the undercut. That's correct.
Hybrid. So they're visually more interesting. They're visually more strange. Their personalities are also a little more, and I don't mean this as a drag, they're a little more one-dimensional. They're less like real people, like Boimler and Mariner. Like I know who those people are in real life. I've met those people. I've hung out with those people. I've worked with.
But
those
you
people.
haven't met Tendi and Rutherford.
Never met a Tendi and a Rutherford. Like that's
an interesting.
They're a little simpler.
Yeah.
They're a little more tropey, and I just think it's not even that they're easier to relate to. I just think they're more fun, and they're more fun to want to spend your mental time with. But I also think they're more alien, and I think particularly in a science fiction show. I think that is compelling. Now, of the 4 leads, I would love to ask you this because I don't know if I know the answer.
Yes.
Who among the 4 leads do you like the best?
Oh, that's a tough question. That is of the 4 leads.
Yeah.
I think it's Tendi.
Yeah, I love Tendi.
I think it's Tendi, but it's like, I do like Boimler. But
he's grown on me a lot.
But Boimler does kind of irritate me.
And he's meant to.
Can we rank the 4?
Sure.
The 2 of us right now?
And I don't mean that as a drag on the writing on the character or Jack Quaid's performance.
It's just our preferences. I would say it's probably Tendi number 1 for me.
Yeah.
Close second, it's Rutherford.
Yeah.
Close second.
Yeah.
Boimler is 3rd and Mariner is 4th.
I would agree, and I don't mean that as
in the same order.
Yeah, same order. And I don't mean that as a drag on any of the characters. Yeah, I just like...
It would be like saying that we liked Rick's, Morty's mom and dad more than Rick and Morty.
Jerry's my favorite character on Rick and Morty.
Jerry is pretty great. Jerry is pretty great.
Like, Jerry
For
is
as
like,
much as that show drags on him, Jerry is like one of the best
my
characters.
My favorite character. Yeah. Spoilers for the Rick and Morty episode.
My favorite character is Bird Person.
Mr. Macy's? Oh, Birdman. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
you also asked me about. I wanted to say one more thing, and then I wanted to answer your question about whether or not they were going to kiss.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about kissing. Can't forget that.
In real life,
yes.
If these were real people and we had to be on the ship with them, I think Boimler would probably be the one you'd most want to spend your time with.
Because Boimler knows how the ship works.
But I also think it is because Boimler is the most well-rounded. I think Boimler has the most character depth.
I agree.
So I don't think Tendi and Rutherford are going to kiss.
You're probably
which
correct.
devastates me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the exploration of a friendship, particularly between a male and a female character, or that's at least how they identify at the time of this episode.
That also seems like what they're kind of doing with Mariner and Boimler.
Yes, who are not, they are just, like, I really admire that. Also, every time I ask Mike McMahon about it, he goes, I don't know, they're great friends. So I think he doesn't
Well,
want to
it's
break my heart.
when you look at this show, right? You have to consider it in where it came from.
Yeah.
It comes from it is birthed from Rick and Morty, which is also birthed from The Simpsons.
Yes.
And those type of shows, especially these comedic animated shows,
Can only progress so far.
yeah, it's a constant reset,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we're
yeah.
always going to take
Yep.
the characters back. So we may never have them kiss because that might be too far a progression. Like
Yeah.
Bart Simpson has never left the 4th grade in 32 seasons.
Yeah. Oh, it's more than that.
Yeah, I know it's further than that.
But
That
yeah.
is my best
Like
guess.
33
Yeah.
years. of
Homer
show.
has
Yeah.
never gotten a promotion.
Yeah.
Marge and Homer have never divorced, even though they probably should.
I don't know. That's an interesting discussion.
That is good. That
for
could
a
be
different
our
time.
to talk about that. Everybody, do you want us to
Yeah,
say hashtag Simpsons talk?
Hashtag Simpsons, yes.
All right, let's go into the next section, Ashley.
Yes. So this show. Why are you firing on me?
Get some phasers in there.
Lower Decks is rife with Easter eggs
Yes.
and references. So I would love to ask, what do you think your favorite Star Trek Easter egg in Lower Decks is?
So I think my favorite Easter egg in Star Trek Lower Decks, and I think that is like something that this show does so well.
I think the show does fan service well because it knows the tone of the show.
You're correct. I have to say that my favorite Easter egg of the entire show has to be, I believe it's from season 2. I think it's episode 2. And it is where we are on the USS Titan.
Yes.
One, you got to give this show mad credit for canonizing the look of the Titan.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, Ashley, was created by a fan for the Star Trek tie-in novels about a decade ago.
I knew it was created for the novels.
So
yes.
they did a series of novels called the Star Trek Titan about, Commander Riker's ship that he gets on after the Enterprise. And I think for the covers of the novels, they were like, well, we need a ship. And so they did a contest and a fan designed the ship.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Up at this point, the novels are not in canon. So the live action stuff, the movies could have ignored it. So I appreciate that Lower Decks and the crew over there was like, we're going to canonize it. So there's a scene where Riker comes out of the holodeck and she goes, were you on the NX-01 again? And he's like, I just love Archer and the crew. It took them a long road to get from there to here.
Yeah.
Like to canonize the Enterprise theme song and also to wink at the joke that the final episode of Star Trek Enterprise is Riker and Deanna on the holodeck.
Yeah.
The fact that he is still, that's maybe his favorite holodeck program now, is he's like, I like to go back and play with Captain Archer. That is my favorite thing. What is yours?
Of course you picked a Riker moment.
Of course.
It's so easy.
Riker is awesome in this show, by the way.
He is.
Yeah.
There's a billion great Easter eggs. My favorite moment is Wolf 359 was an inside job.
Yes.
Which also is the type of reference where I'm like, if you don't know what that means, I can't explain it to you. I need you to just watch.
Well, the funniest thing about
Star
that is
Trek.
technically that's a true statement.
It is, yeah. But no one's supposed to know.
Yeah, that's true.
When that happened, I was fully screaming at it. It was so funny. Yeah, I love the way they handle referring to canon.
It's also interesting, too, because I know there's a little bit, so there's been a debate back and forth in certain fan circles, and I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
There is some debate with the idea, is Lower Decks in Star Trek canon? Now,
it's called Star Trek Lower Decks. It's made by Paramount. Of course it is.
in my opinion, it is.
Yeah.
And in my opinion as well, Star Trek the Animated Series is as well.
Same. Yep.
Because it was a series made by Paramount.
Also, enough of it has been canonized by this point.
It's interesting because now I think people are starting to cotton on to this idea because they just announced the Star Trek Lower Decks, Star Trek Strange New Worlds crossover.
Yeah.
But
you think they're going to give Boimler purple hair? I have questions.
I don't know. I hope so.
I hope so too.
Anyways, I think I've always considered the show to be canon.
Me too.
And I think the way that this show has canonized some of the goofier aspects, has really delighted me, actually.
They also, I think the best example of this is we've talked a lot about the tone and knowing the type of show. One of the most important villains is the Packlids. The Packlids are one of the stupidest Star Trek aliens that have ever aliened. And the way that they use them in the show and really works, and it really feeds like the type of show and, dare I say, the skill level of some of the characters who we've seen up to this point. And I know some people have found that irritating, but I actually think it really speaks to the care with which the show is made and the process that the creators undertake. Because if the Lower Deckers were fighting, I don't know, the Jem'Hadar, it would just not be correct. Do you know what I mean by that?
I understand. Because the Jem'Hadar, the main villains of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, would be too much of a. They actually never appeared on Voyager. They'd be too much of a threat.
Yeah,
it would be like my. So one of the funniest things, Ashley hummed it earlier on, is the Star Trek Lower Decks theme song, which I love that as an orchestral because it like really hints back to Jerry Goldsmith, da 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 da. Anyways,
high key, just a great Star Trek theme.
My favorite shot in that opening, because there's a lot of it's like a starship doing goofy stuff, right? My favorite shot has always been the shot where they pull into the Borg, and they're like, let's get out of here.
Oh, that's so funny. My favorite shot from the opening credits is the space slug on the back of the
nacelle
ship. I think it's so funny.
Well, my favorite one too is the reason why is because every season they've added more stuff.
Yeah.
So originally it was the Romulans fighting the Borg. In season 2, then it was the Packlids and the Romulans fighting the Borg. And then season 3, I'll just say they added
something else.
They added so to me, I'm like,
it's the Simpsons couch gag.
By the time it gets to season 5, it's gonna be like packed.
That's so funny.
But I love the shot of them like, ensign turn about, get the hell out of here.
I also want to say that they have handled revisiting the beloved Gene Roddenberry trope of an energy entity in some of my favorite ways possible in Lower Decks. And that's also because animation allows you a different type of freedom than a live action show. So,
I also want to give. I guess we can wrap this up here.
Yeah.
I want to. One, we got to talk about. You have this really interesting question in the notes. I want to talk about. I definitely want to hit on this.
Yeah.
Is like, what are some of the things that Lower Decks does better than other Star Trek shows?
Okay, so Lower Decks does a couple things I think better than other Star Trek shows. One, Lower Decks, I think, does the meta-narrative fan service better than any other Star Trek show. And going all the way back to TNG, we have fan service. We have fan service in the pilot episode in the form of cameos and stuff like that. And it is part and parcel to the tone of the show and comedy animation. But I think Lower Decks does that better than any other show. I also think Lower Decks does, and this goes back to the conversation about Mariner and Boimler and Tendi and Rutherford, I think Lower Decks does the friendship thing better than any other show. I really think they do an excellent job at showing friendship relationships in a way that, like, in other shows, you'll get one really standout, maybe two really standout friendships, and they're not usually A plots. Like Julian and O'Brien are a B or a C plot in a lot of episodes. Like they're a great friendship, but they put the value of friendship really above all else. And I really value that about the show. And I like what it says about these characters and what they're actually good at. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
I think, and this is going to sound shocking, I know, because I've been kind of judgmental here and there on Lower Decks. And again, I love Lower Decks.
You can love something and be critical.
You can.
It's okay.
I almost think in some ways Star Trek Lower Decks shows Utopia better than the other shows.
Interesting.
And let me explain.
Please do.
There are a lot of scenes in this show of multi-aliens, multi-species sitting at a table, playing a game, having a drink, working their things out, doing whatever.
Yeah, often playing very silly games as well.
And the way it is presented on Lower Decks is it's just a normal day. That's what you do. And to me, what better representation of a we all work together, we all work forward utopia than that? Then we're all going to sit around and we're all going to play racquetball.
Okay,
that's fine.
I'm gonna sum that up with this weird statement.
Please.
Lower Decks presents domesticity and comfort.
It makes the Star Trek universe more real to me.
Yes, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
That's so funny.
Whereas the other shows, it's more of an ideal, and I sort of buy it.
Well, and it's also the main focus is always on like what war are we in?
Yeah.
What are we breaking down? What are we exploring?
Every creative thing you read, every book, every show, every movie, you have to give into a suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
And with Star Trek, you have to give them the suspension of disbelief of like, well, how does the moneyless post-scarcity
Let's not talk about currency.
economy work?
Yeah.
And how does this many species get along?
Yeah.
And Lower Decks, I think, does a really good job of like showing in a humorous way.
Yes.
The way that, the day-to-day operations of that universe would actually
what does
be.
a birthday party look like?
Yeah.
We've seen that on Lower Decks.
We have.
Yeah.
Or what would we've seen that. And that's that's something that I think Lower Decks does way better than any, because all the other ones are concerned with the mission
Bigger
or
concepts,
the planet or the war or the crystalline entity.
And I think that's why a lot of people connect with it. So let's wrap this up by answering the question that you dragged us for not answering earlier.
Okay, sorry.
If somebody is on the fence about watching Lower Decks, and there still are Star Trek fans and not Star Trek fans alike, why should they, in your opinion?
I think in a lot of ways, Star Trek Lower Decks might be the best entry point to someone who has never seen Star Trek before.
Honestly, I also think Prodigy is a really good one.
And I would say to you that I would say just like, look, I know I keep comparing this to Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because Mr. Mike McMahon, the showrunner creator of Star Trek Lower Decks, he
from Rick and Morty.
He was an assistant.
Yeah.
And he worked his way up.
Yep.
And that's admirable. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's very Starfleet, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He was the lower decker on Rick and Morty. So I remember when I first started, I didn't watch Rick and Morty until season 3.
Yeah.
Because I stayed away from it. And when I went to Rick and Morty, I was like, okay, I've heard the beginning is a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Google a list that says, what is the best episode of Rick and Morty ever?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one I'm going to watch. And if I like that episode, I will keep going. I Googled it. I liked that episode. I kept going. I went back to the beginning. I would say to everybody, if you have ever considered watching Star Trek, or if you like shows like Rick and Morty, or Disenchanted, or Solar Opposites, then I would say give this show a shot. And I would say go find that list. I don't think you have to watch the pilot. In fact, I almost would recommend not watching the pilot because I don't think you need to know the continuity to be able to enjoy the show. They're pretty one-offs. I would say go find one of those lists. If one of the pictures enthuses you, watch that episode. I honestly think, look, Lower Decks is one of the best Star Trek shows being made right now.
I agree.
There's an argument that it might be the best.
It's my favorite of
Star Trek
the
show.
current batch. Yeah.
I never dislike watching it. And I think it's a really good, I think if you watch Lower Decks and you have a good time, it is a really good entryway to the rest of the Star Trek universe. I think it's a great way to ease yourself in to this universe. What would you say to somebody who's on the fence? Actually, I'm on the fence about watching. I'm thinking about doing this into Lower Decks.
Transporting.
What would you say to me?
So a lot of people I know are on the fence about Lower Decks because they're kind of on the fence about Star Trek in general.
I can see that.
They've either had some exposure to it in the films or the television show, and it just hasn't connected with them for whatever reason, which is fine. So I often say to people that Lower Decks is great because you don't need to know anything else to be able to enjoy it. It totally works just as a workplace comedy.
That is in space.
And as a friendship comedy that happens to be dressed up like science fiction.
Fair.
And happens to have a bunch of, and I think if you don't know the Easter eggs, the comedy and the broader strokes absolutely still hold up. You just get more out of it if you know that Wolf 359 was an inside job.
Really harping on that.
It's so funny.
Do you believe Wolf 359 was an inside job?
It was. I'm that guy, convince me, with the coffee cup.
Mr. Wolf, fire. That's a deep cut for anybody.
Yeah, there you go. But also, Star Trek Lower Decks, while being the Star Trekkiest Star Trek, it gives me the closest to 90s Star Trek vibes that I had in a long time up to that point.
Which is like what you...
Which is my
your era
favorite
of
Star Trek.
yeah.
Exactly. Like I said, Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. So it gives me those same feels, but it also, in a lot of ways, rejects the self-seriousness that a lot of people rush up against when they watch Star Trek. So I think it is, for a post-2000 generation watcher, I think it is the most digestible, the most relatable, and probably the most fun Star Trek that you can get right now. And it's honestly, genuinely laugh out loud funny.
Nice.
And if you don't like the animation, you'll get over it.
You'll get past it really quick.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I would say.
That didn't work.
If I convince you, please let me know.
If she convinced you, email her at geekhistoryLesson@gmail.com. Well, Ashley, you know what that means. That means it's time for...
Ooh,
the recommended reading. What's going to happen? What is that, Ashley?
I'm going to tell you, so you explain what it is.
The recommended reading is... Some of these sound effects are so short.
I know.
Anyways, recommended reading. If you guys go over to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, you will find a full list of recommendations if you're excited to go down the lower decks. Rabbit hole. We have a whole list for every episode of Geek History Lesson. Little widgets that take you to Amazon so you can purchase it immediately. What's going to join that list today?
So what is going on? There are three things. The first is the first two seasons of Star Trek Lower Decks, because that's the only ones that you can get right now on Blu-ray.
That's right.
The next is the Star Trek Lower Decks comic book, which just debuted at the time of this recording. Woo! So right now it's a pre-order. Someday it will be a real book that you can get. And lastly, but not leastly, it is Mike McMahon's TNG Season 8 book.
It's a funny book.
It's very funny, and it will, if you check it out and then you watch the show, or you've been reading the show and then you check it out, you can really kind of see the seeds being planted and it percolating. So that is what is on recommended reading. Lots of fun stuff this week.
All right, now we're going to open up.
Ooh, that's in multiple channels. I heard that in two different headphones.
That's right.
Did I recognize it? Absolutely not.
It's the Bajoran wormhole, which also leads us to the honor roll,
Hey,
Ashley.
what's that?
Ashley, why don't you tell us, and I'll read the honor rolls.
Oh, boy. The honor roll is where if you give us 5 stars or more on Apple Podcasts, or whatever the heck it's called right now, we'll read whatever you write.
It's called Apple Music.
Apple Music?
Oh, Apple Podcasts, yeah.
And if you're an international people, because the internet is rude, please take a screenshot and email it to us at geekhistorylesson@gmail.com. Let us know where you're from, because we want to shout you out as much as possible. All right, Jason, who is joining us today in the Teacher's Lounge?
Trewa Hopas is coming in here with Great Caesars Podcast, Batman. Hey to all GHL listeners, and to Jason and Ashley. Hello.
Hello.
I first found this podcast during the 6-month shutdown, or coronavirus, as the kids are calling it these days. Thank you for all the great listens, character voices, and deep dives into all the things geek, from movies to comics and sci-fi. My son Ethan, who is 9 years old, loves to hear the background and info on our favorite characters and concepts.
Yay.
He wants to know, why is there no Venom episode yet? I mean, he has a great comic series and 2 Sony movies. What is up with that? Yeah, I mean, that's a fair argument. His words, not mine.
That's so funny.
I love this podcast. It is something I listen to alone or with my comic-loving kids. I don't agree with Ashley a lot on her things and her whole identity politics and learnings and such, but she's still such a great host, and just because her likes are not mine is no reason to hate the show, which will help me and my family have some fun through a dark time and for everyone. And geeks all over the world should stick together, whether we agree or not.
Heck
so
yeah.
Keep the faith and don't let the Mad Titan keep you down. Thanks for all your great work. Well, cool. And I'm sorry to your son Ethan about the Venom episode. That's a overlook on our end. So I'm sorry about that. Next is the floppiest fish coming in with, thank you guys for making this podcast. It helps me get through the day, and I love to hear you guys make jokes while talking and catching me up on my favorite heroes. Keep doing what you doing. And to both of those, I say...
And who's in the Teacher's Lounge today, Jason?
In the Teacher's Lounge, there is a man, and he thinks he sees something outside the window. He keeps looking, and he keeps flagging down every teacher. He's wearing a yellow shirt. I have asked him to leave several times. He keeps telling me he's a captain, and every time I tell him to leave, and I say, please get out here as fast as possible, he keeps telling me this.
Maximum warp.
That's what he says.
Get out of here, John Lithgow.
Maximum warp.
So there you go. That is who's in the Teacher's Lounge. Welcome into the Teacher's Lounge, everybody. If you want to join them, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Music. And don't forget to subscribe and follow our podcast wherever you find us on podcast listening apps and devices.
Or Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, and tell us tell your friend. If you enjoyed this podcast, tell your friends about it. Ashley, where can they follow this podcast on social media?
You can follow us at geekhistorylesson.com/blog. We have new blogs every single week. You can also find us on facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, on Instagram at geekhistorylesson, and on Twitter at GHL Podcast because they have a character restriction.
That's right. You can find Ashley on Instagram and Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson.
Yes. There's only been 425 episodes, Jason.
Wow. And you ask why I've been firing at you this entire episode. Here's a Klingon disruptor for you. Here's a short Klingon disruptor. Here's a Borg sound.
That's a Borg tractor.
I meant I was gonna say Instagram.com and then I got messed up.
It's okay.
At Ashley V. Robinson. Follow me. It doesn't matter. All right. So let's get to hashtag stick around. By the way, this is a sound effect for hashtag stick around. It's not a great sound effect because I want one of you to send me in a sound effect. If you send me a sound effect for our segment that we have at the very end at all the plugs, hashtag stick around to geekhistorylesson@gmail.com. I want one of our listeners to send us a sound effect. I will send you 3 different Superman action figures. You're gonna get like you're gonna get a Superman sort of
Superman
grab.
soup.
Yeah, you're going to get 3 different like Superman action figure / toys. It's going to be a Superman mystery box that is coming to you. You have to live in America. If you don't care about the Superman toys, you can still send us. I mean, we'll give you the credit if you live internationally. But I'm only sending this to people in the United States because international postage is quite expensive. But I want a sound effect for hashtag stick around. Send it to us at geekhistorylesson@gmail.com. It needs to be better than this. That's not a great sound effect.
The bar's low.
Hashtag stick around, Ashley.
Yeah.
What would you like to see Star Trek Lower Decks canonize into Star Trek histories? Because they canonized the Titan. They have canonized other things. What's something you would like to, or even Lower Decks to tackle? Where would you want to see, where would you want Lower Decks to touch that has been like maybe talked about or hinted about in Star Trek lore? There's lots of things like that.
Okay.
But they've never done it.
I would have said the Titan for a long time.
Okay.
I would like to have confirmation that Bajor joined the Federation.
Interesting.
That's what I would really like to have.
Interesting. I don't know what year Deep Space Nine ended.
I think
in their
it's
canon.
too soon.
It is too soon.
But I would like, that is the like number one thing I want canonized from Star Trek.
So you want Bajor in the Federation?
I do. Yeah.
Interesting. Even though I know there are many people out there that would say that Bajor joining the Federation, it should never happen. It's very interesting.
Look, I don't think it should. I think
I think it just shows your love for the Bajorans.
I think this is too soon. This is set after Voyager, which is not that long after Deep Space Nine. I don't think Bajor joins the Federation for probably another 100 or 200 years.
Because this is like 2383.
I have it written down at the top of my notes. 2380 is season 1.
2380.
So it would be 2382 in season 3.
Yes, interesting. And I think Deep Space Nine ends like 75 or something
believe
like that.
so.
I agree with you. I think it takes like couple hundred years for Bajor to get ready for it.
But just off the top of my head, like that is the thing I want. How about you?
That's a great choice.
Thank
That's
you.
a really good choice,
Thank
actually.
you.
I want to see a Gorn
In Starfleet?
in Starfleet.
Ooh, that's cool. And then you wouldn't, because it's animation, you wouldn't be sort of stuck.
Yep.
You wouldn't have to worry about the effects budget.
And it's far enough removed
I
from
agree.
Arena and Strange New Worlds
We have Klingons there.
that we can assume that it's A-okay. I want to
I
see
would
a
love
Gorn and a Lower Decks. I want them to canonize that the Gorn join Starfleet
I mean, you know,
or join the Federation at some point. You know,
we've seen the wall. We've seen where the wall fell. So like,
I'm going to give you another
weirder
one.
things could happen.
If I can't get that, I'll
Okay.
give you an easier one.
Okay.
I want to see a Xindi insectoid in Starfleet.
Specifically the insectoids.
Well, just because I thought if that would be something that animation could do.
Yeah,
It could be any of the Xindi, but I want, because it was hinted at in Star Trek Enterprise,
Yes,
I
yeah.
want Lower Decks to canonize it.
That's cool. I would
Show
love that.
us a Xindi in the 24th century.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. That's what I want.
Great.
There you go.
And I can hire Jason to write that freelance script.
I would love to do that.
There you go.
So there you go. Hope you enjoy Lower Decks. Go enjoy it. And this is a sound effect we play every time we leave in this podcast, of course. It's everybody's favorite. You want to hear what an Andorian view screen sounds like?
Absolutely.
That's it. You want to hear an Andorian door?
Yeah, I love Andorians.
kind of boring. Had lots of sound effects on here. And I would say, I have Zindy. You want a Zindy Controls one?
Absolutely.
Here's a Zindy
100%.
Controls one. Here we go.
That's kind of cool.
I mean, it's all right. I guess it's okay. I was trying to play a Jonathan Archer here, but there's not a lot of good ones on here.
I am Captain Kirk.
I am going through the Trek Core audio sounds, everybody. If you're looking for a lot of voices on here, you want to hear an affirmative?
Yep.
Affirmative.
No,
thank you,
Majel
Majel.
Barrett. Majel Barrett. How about this one? Let's hear Majel.
Stability loss was due to an impact by a subspace interface pocket.
Oh, thank you, Majel. I did not know that.
I love that her computer voice is just like stern mom.
Majel, could we get you to say Geek History Lesson for us, please?
You are not authorized to access this facility.
Come on,
Come
Majel.
on,
Well,
babe.
Come on.
Mrs. Roddenberry.
Mrs. Roddenberry, please just say thank you for listening. This has been Geek History Lesson. That's all I want. Majel.
Unable to comply.
Oh, come on.
So rude.
What is the deal with this?
Can't believe we finally got her on the show, and this is how she treats us.
I know. I cannot believe that she will not, come on, Majel.
Warning. Self-destruct sequence has been initiated. Warp core overload in 7 minutes.
Well, we got 7 minutes. We got a long time. What are we going to fill that time with?
Well, we got to slam out a Geek History Lesson extra, so.
Okay, there you go.
Why don't you say your name, and then I'll say my name, and then you can dismiss the class.
Okay, well, I am Jason Inman. Thank you so much for listening. Who are you again?
Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody out there. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast about Lower Decks.
Alert on deck 8.
What? We're going to leave, Majel. For God's sake. Would you just... this has been Geek History Lesson. Thank you so much for listening. Ashley, will you please dismiss the class?
Bye.